Hey, let me know when you're ready.
Appreciate it.
We also have a couple of questions from Charles Byers. So Charles, you're unmuted. Feel free to ask your questions.
Great, thanks. A very thought-compelling hour. Appreciate very much the perspectives on all of this sort of business, marketing, sales stuff that might be a little foreign to an engineer like me getting started in the consulting game.
Yeah.
So thanks for that and appreciate it very much. The first question that I have is, right now I'm sort of a sole proprietor, gig economist, taking what falls in my lap. So certainly marketing and sales are necessary. But the question I have before I get too deep into that is, under what circumstances should I move from this sort of gig economy, taking it as it comes, to a LLC or higher form of business? What are the advantages, disadvantages, and costs associated with actually getting higher up the incorporation food chain?
Right. So one of the key things there is limited liability. So, certainly if, you're an IEEE member, you've probably been made aware of, for instance, the professional liability insurance that you can get through IEEE and Mercer. But I think usually one of the things that's going to help you with that, and there's training that goes along that also to help you avoid liability. In other words, putting the correct terminology into your contract, and for that matter, how you communicate with your customers to make sure that they understand that, and ultimate liability lies with them. You want to make sure they understand that they're accepting liability for the use of what you're giving them. You certainly have liability for its correctness and its that it's not buggy and effective. But sometimes you're going to want to get liability insurance. But another thing that protects you is in the corporate entity, it's something like an LLC, which is very easy to manage, doesn't require a lot of official minutes and meetings and corporate governance activities. But it has limited liability. So if something should happen, if you make sure that you decouple the bank account, so you have a bank account for the LLC and it's separate from your personal bank account, you try not to mingle the money between the two. You treat it like it's a business. In other words, when you have a business expense, you submit an expense report, the business then reimburses you for the expense, right? Things like this that make it very clear that it is separate from you as a person, right? Then if by some chance something really bad happens and someone decides to sue the company, for some mistake it's been made, an error or omission or some other problem, some contracts go bad and you never necessarily know why that, why it had to be that way. But it should stop with the company. It should not pass through the company to you if you kept everything separated, right? It's the corporate veil. And so that's one reason why you might want to do that. It's relatively inexpensive to form an LLC. If you actually use an attorney and get it structured the way you need, with some specifics for you, it could cost you around $1,500. If you went online and did it yourself, you could probably do it for $150. You may or may not have a well structured at that point, but it would still probably be effective. You'll have it, if you create one with its own tax ID, right, then you can have multiple members of the LLC, and it can be member managed or manager managed. Okay, so the decision to make, and you can decide whether it's going to be taxed as a 1065 partnership or as an S corp. Not a whole lot of difference, but I think you could even decide to be taxed like a corporation. I'm not sure necessarily why you do that with that vehicle, but there may be a reason. Is that more information than you wanted?
No, that was absolutely perfect, and lots to think about there. It sounds like my neck might be out a little ways because I haven't taken this step yet, so I will ponder
it's okay. So as I pointed out in that one slide, the most important thing is to get in business, right? It's hard to argue about money when you don't have any, right? You have to have customers. Well, once you get some customers, you got a little bit of funds rolling through the operation. then maybe now's the time to go pay for that LLC. You know, make sure you have your books up to snuff and things are going, because that's the other thing. When you go to prepare taxes at the end of the year, right? Have you kept track of all that? You know, if you've got the books taken care of, it does cost a little bit of money, you know, but you know, it helps you in the end, and gains and losses flow through to you on your personal taxes. So.
Excellent. Okay, I do have a second question, which is, you know, more about marketing, I suppose, and that is, how do you figure out what to charge? You know, when somebody says, here's a job, how much will it cost to do this job? You have an idea about how many hours it might take you, but how do I determine at various stages of the maturity of my consultancy what it's worth and what the market will bear, and how do I know if I'm overcharging and leaving business on the table because of it?
Right.
How do I optimize the total income?
It's, you know, there's a bit of black magic here, and there's a whole bunch of different aspects to the question you asked. So one thing is for you to understand the amount of effort it's going to take to do something. So one of the things I usually separate things into is there are things that I can do that are fixed price, right? Because it's very, very clear. So typically, if I could write the test for determining that I'm done, right? If I could write that succinctly, then, you know, essentially I'm going to say, you're going to pay me X when everything on this list is completed and checked off, right? So if you can do that, then it's pretty easy to write a fixed price contract, you know, if you know how to do all those things. On the other hand, quite often you have customers that don't really know what they want, right? And they're still noodling it through, and they still want you to give a fixed price, but you can't at that point. So sometimes the way I handle that is, all right, well, let's get started, and I'll do some amount of work on an hourly basis to help define the scope, determine what we're going to accomplish. And I'll give you all of those specifications and all of, you know, we'll develop the list of deliverables, and, you know, and we'll try to time box it. And then after that, we can either continue in that vein if you like it, or we could switch to a fixed price if we've got a clarity on what's to be delivered, right? So then the idea is, what should you charge, right? So there's a divide between, let's call it contracting and consulting, right? And Jacob Benengo actually has a good presentation on this, where you sort of have to stair step up it. When you're initially going out into the market, it's hard for you to say, I'm worth $175 an hour. You know, maybe in certain areas, you know, where you have an expertise, you can do that. And actually, Gary Blank has a you know, Blank's law. He has a way of calculating a little spreadsheet that helps you calculate some of that. However, in reality, when you're getting started, contracting rates are probably, I don't know, let's say 65 to 95, depending on your skill and the market that you're going into. You know, they're going to be lower, right? Or, you know, it's not too bad. But as you get customers into your corral who are coming back over and over and over, you're able to raise your rates, and, you know, pretty soon you're charging 125, or, you know, because, you know, if they want you, you know, you've got other things to do. You're trying to decide who to spend your time with, right? And they're willing, they know you're good. They know that they like to engage with you, and they're willing to pay a little bit more. So you kind of raise it over time. And you sort of transition from more of a contracting role into a more consulting role. You find that if you're in those senior positions where you're helping to guide maybe a team putting together something, and you're showing which direction to work and who should be doing what, and give them clues into the specifics of the technology maybe that they're working on. Those things are more consulting functions than contracting functions. And so those also lead to higher rates. Does that help?
Absolutely. And I appreciate that perspective very much. Sounds like there's some runway in front of me. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.